session. Good afternoon, distinguished panelists, attendees, and my dear friends. Today, on the occasion of this Global Accessibility Awareness Day, which in short called GAAD, it gives me immense pleasure to be part of this great initiative organized by the Broadband India Forum. May I request all other audience and the panelists to please mute their mic just to avoid the echo. Uh, and I also feel privileged to be given this opportunity to moderate this session on the topic of, on the very important topic of importance of staying connected during the COVID environment and what role these standards will play. Before we begin with the panel session, after having the context setting and the various policy updates from our government officials, I would like to share a few thoughts to set the context of this session. I also thank our chief guest and the distinguished speaker from the previous session for sharing those excellent thoughts, giving us latest updates from policy making, and showing their valued participation towards this initiative. Today, during these unprecedented times, we all know the importance of staying connected with each other. We have been doing it for the last 1.5 years, uh, uh, where we cannot meet physically. People are attending meetings, various educational sessions are getting conducted through the online mode nowadays. However, policy or regulatory decisions also need to be made to ensure that these services are ensured and reaches to every citizen of the country. During the pandemic, one of the main concerns faced by people with disabilities was to get access to such online activities. I think we heard, and we will be hearing it from our panelists. There were cases reported where disabled children had to stop going to school, come to colleges as well, as there was not enough medium or a platform or at least the awareness given to them for attending such session on an online mode. Today, through this medium and on the occasion of GAAD 2021, we would like to create awareness to this country on the importance of staying connected and to ensure that various essential services, especially digital services, are accessible or provided to all of our community. When we talk about standards, the role of standards plays an important role. We heard it from our the chief guest, Mr. Malcolm. It is a very important role which standards play in the entire implementation strategy. And it is important that these standards need to be created based on the country's specific requirement also, like in India. The Indian standard making body, such as Bureau of Indian Standard, is quite keen and is working on the adoption of many other standards, including a standard which is specifically for public procurement for public with people with disabilities in India. I'm personally associated with the various technical committees, including a technical committee on active assisted living at Bureau of Indian Standard. To some extent, the implementations appears to be not up to the speed, and is largely due to the lack of awareness about accessibility mandates, which are already in place by our policymakers, and the availability of the relevant standard in compliance requirements, support for compliance, and monitoring and accountability. So there are various reasons because of which we are not up to the speed, but we are doing all, and I think we will work together to ensure that in the very near future. The implementation of accessibility standard across the board by the government agencies and private service provider is very critical and need to be taken up at the center and the state level with an utmost urgency. These measures will go a long way to ensure all Indians, including our disabled and elderly people, are taken care of during these troubled times. We heard about this morning the RPW Act 2016, which has expanded the definition of disability to include somewhere around 21 types of disabilities. The Act includes several stipulations designed to offer persons with disabilities in education, employment opportunities, and enjoy basic human rights and dignities. The Act also clearly states that it is mandatory to conform to accessibility standards and specifies that accessibility refers to both environment and information and communication technology. And we heard it.
Dinesh, I am sorry. Sorry to interrupt. I think there are messages from the interpreter that there is some disturbance.
It should be me only, but let me just give me a second, just a second.
Sure.
Saurabh, just confirm if it is okay. No. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Karishma, for the intervention. I would like to, I mean, I know there are many standards, various standards which we are working on, but I would like to highlight in this session context setting about one particular standard, which is EN 301549, which basically started in Europe, but now it has become a global standard, and which also incorporates or address the US Section 508. And this also includes W3C WCAG guidelines, which are of utmost and urgent need for its adoption and implementation in India. US is fully harmonized with this EU standard, and the latest version, which has been globally accepted, is version 3.1.1, which is 2019 version, and the market adoption has already started. As mentioned earlier, there is an urgent need to adopt this standard to address the Indian requirement and its further implementation for procurement. We know that the CDAC has been working, the mighty ministry has been working, and I think very soon we will be able to reach to a stage where this global standard will become an important part of the public procurement of ICT products in India. I'm also happy to be a part of this committee, working with Karishma and Dr. Nirmita under Broadband India Forum. GIG 2.0, you've already heard about it. It's a comprehensive document encompassing ICT accessibility for websites and applications, and is also aligned with international standard. However, as I understand, compliance by the government websites, which is catching up very fast, and we heard the numbers, how many websites have already been complied, still a lot need to be done, including the applications. With that, may I request our audience, if they have any questions to any of our panelists, to post these questions as part of the chat window. So it will be, we will try after each panelist intervention, we will try to address that response if we have that question ready. Otherwise, we will take up the Q&A at the end of the session. With that context setting, let me, one more for your information, we had Professor Abhay Krandekar. He's having an ongoing call going on right now. He will join us a little later. So we will begin with the panel without having keynote at this point of time. But later, when we join us, we will intervene, and then we will allow him to speak and share his thoughts. So with that, I begin with my panel by introducing my first panelist, who is Dr. Subramaniam Nilakanthanji. Let me have the pleasure to briefly introduce you. Dr. Subramaniam is a Senior Director R&D at CDAC. CDAC is a Center for Development of Advanced Computing at Pune Center. He's a member of various technical committees of government, doctoral committees at BIS, IEEE Standards Associations, and our Indian Telecom Standard Development Society, India. He is involved in coordinating R&D activities across CDAC centers, which is engaged in preparation of technology foresight and roadmap reports, standardization activities, and project on ICT accessibility, including the topic of AI, cybersecurity, 5G, among others. He will also be joined with his colleague, Shrimati Denali Singh, who is an Associate Director, CDAC, Center for Development of Advanced Computing. She is involved in R&D projects in the areas of natural language processing, machine-assisted translations and speech technologies. She has been part of development and deployment of various machine translations and speech technology solutions in Indian language. She also contributes in the ICT Accessibility Standard and e-governance standard project. With that, I will request Dr. Subbu to kindly share his perspective around this session topic. Sir, this is for you as well as for my other panelists. Let's keep your time for this intervention to maximum 8 to 10 minutes. Thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Subbu. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dinesh. A very good afternoon and good evening and good morning to all of you from wherever you are joining from. It's a pleasure to join in this key event, and sincere thanks to BA Forum for inviting CDAC and us in this event, and thanks to MEITI for this key initiative in this. If you allow me, can I just share the presentation slide?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. I hope the slide is visible.
It came, but now, okay. I think you need to change the display setting.
Sorry for that. Just give me a problem.
Dr. Subramanian, I think we are putting up the presentation from our side, so please don't worry. We'll run it from our side for you. You can only suggest the next slide change. Here the presentation is coming up for you.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you so much.
Is it visible to everybody?
Yes,
Yes.
Rajaji, thank you.
Thank you
so much.
Yeah. So we would be touching, myself and my colleague Ms. Lenali would be touching upon the aspect specifically bringing out the challenges in the context of the pandemic being faced by the differently able communities, and also touching upon the accessibility technologies and its role in aiding their life to be more comfortable and easing out the challenges, and also the policy interventions, as well as the role of standards. Yeah, we can go ahead to the next slide. When you look at the specific challenges that are being faced, we all know that the physical distancing is a major challenge even for all members, including the members of PWDs. The initial concerns of the infected surfaces were of a major concern, where one uses the tactile perception for navigation. Wearing of mask is again not a very conducive position for people who are dependent on the sign language. Many members who undergo routine therapies had to discontinue it, making their life more challenging. More than all this, the daily life of the differently abled, one can imagine, with the poorly designed services for their food, grocery, delivery of financial and other kind of online services, is a major challenge that has been faced on a day-to-day affair. Needless to say, the challenges being faced with respect to the online training by the children, as well as the teacher who are helping in the differently able communities, transportation, getting vaccinated and getting priorities and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, next slide, please. So when you look at a case specifically on the field of education, which is largely affected, you see that the non-availability of the teaching learning content material in an accessible format is a major challenge. Of course, needless to say, the major challenge also includes for many who don't have access or not comfortable in accessing the devices, digital devices, having internet connectivity. And there were certain interventions made by a lot of state governments and the central government also to use the TV as an effective media for delivery of content. However, you would note that not all the services rendered by TV were interesting for reasons. It was not always supported by sign language, lack of subtitles, and video description. Students having visual impairments had reported very serious and peculiar issues in using this online platforms, as reported by the study conducted by agency Vidhi on their study of 4 states published in December 2020. Teachers were also very much relevant on the caregivers or largely on the parents to support the persons with disabilities. On a whole, you can see that the one-way teaching and with limited interaction, there is a serious concern in the whole gamut of things that is happening around for the purpose of education. Yeah, next slide. Thank you. Now, when you look at the interventions, UN had rightly intervened and came up with a policy brief during the May 2020, where it kind of published that public health information should be largely accessible, information dissemination, and there should not be any discrimination with respect to the allocation of medical services. And also related to mental health intervention, it is required for inclusiveness to be considered. And when one considers about lifting of lockdown, one has to be very sensitive about the particular situation of the PWDs. And again, it emphasized about the importance of distance learning to be more inclusive in nature. Now, coming to our own country in India, the DPWD guidelines actually stipulates quite a lot of importance to make the content available in an accessible format in Indian languages, exempting the restrictions for the caregivers and specific provisions in the common retail stores and whenever it is opening for PWDs and older persons. And importantly, the 24/7 help state help number along with the video calling as well as the sign language support. So these were the policy level kind of interventions that have come across to address the pandemic situation now. Now, when we look at the technological aspect, as you can see, next slide please, the assistive technologies, it will be interesting for us to dwell upon a minute to look at the background. Way back in 1620s, we had John Pablo Bonnet, who had started devising methods for hearing impaired. And today you see that more than about 130, and it is believed there are about 300 such official sign languages available. Similarly, the father and apostle of the blind, Valentine Hoya, had been the pioneering work for his building up the first National Institution of Blind Youth in Paris in 1784, where Louis Braille also was a student and later became a teacher, laid a solid foundation. Similarly, in 1848, we see attempts being made by Jean-Marc Gaspard, a French physician, towards educating the intellectually challenging children. Yeah, go to the next slide, please. Now, since then, you see a large amount of technological advancements and aids that are coming into place. 1920s, you saw the stair lift first time being designed. Then you saw in 30s the wheelchair. 35s, you saw the first talking book. 40s, you saw the Zimmer frame. Bell Labs came with the transistor for aiding the hearing aid. 60s became the electrical wheelchair. 70s, speech technologies started coming in. 80s, you saw the first screen reader by IBM. 90s, you saw various interventions because of software and PCs coming into the world. 2000, you see a large number of intervention of technology in ICT, brain-computer interface, and robotics, and the easily accessible, cost-effective method through smartphones, enabling various ATs together. So here I would like to emphasize, as the earlier speakers, the power of smartphone is quite well known, and we understand various daily life support are being provided, various interesting and AI-based apps. And going further, if you look at the advancements in AT, next slide please, we see that there is a larger role of sensor technologies on IoTs and AI going to play a game-changing role for accessibility towards natural language processing, auto translation, automatic testing and remediation for accessibility planners and things like that. Now with this, we see that in the global context, next slide please, we see in the global context, the ATs are addressing issues related to various disabilities like physical, visual, hearing, mental and intellectual and learning disabilities. So with this, I park here and invite my colleague, Ms. Lenali, to talk about the Indian context and the role of standards here. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, sir, for setting up the floor.
Lenali, ma'am, you've got two speakers on at the same mics on at the same time, please.
Hello.
Yes, now it's perfect, Lenaliji. Thank you.
Yeah, I thank Dr. Subramaniam for setting up the floor for assistive technology. Let me take a privilege and continue the process of, as you are aware that RPWT Act, as per that, we have around 21 aspects of disabilities, but some of aspects from the Indian context is not included in the global forum, like chronic neurological conditions, blood disorder, like hemophilia, multiple disabilities including deafblind, even acid attack victims is also one of the aspects now in the disability aspects. As Rajat sir, next slide please. As Rajat sir has mentioned that every user must be able to experience web-based services, content, and other digital products. In around 1 billion people worldwide have disabilities, and in India it is around 20 crores. So it is imperative that Indian language users with disabilities are serviced by technologies, standards, and solutions to be implemented. Next slide, please. Yeah, this slide. Okay, thank you. Around 80% of Indian uses Indian language in their daily lives. So they would love to use these devices like telephone, mobile, laptops, and in Indian languages for education, entertainment, commerce, e-governance, and the contents in Indian languages. As you will be already aware that 22 constitutional recognized Indian languages are now available in Unicode. CDAC for more than 2 decades have offered fonts, SDKs, DTP packages for Indian languages. Mighty BIS.try have already come out with the guidelines towards Indian language support in mobile applications. International players like Microsoft, Facebook, Google, Apple support many Indian languages in application and the operating system. In addition to that, CDAC has also developed a BOSS operating system which suits the Indian digital environment and supports most of the Indian languages. CDAC is already providing language solutions in terms of language tools like transliteration, typing, translation, speech, and information retrieval, and solution in the area of AI and machine language. During the pandemic, though we have lots of technology developed, but due to the lack of accessibility in the existing application and website, technology couldn't be couldn't be a best friend for most of them. So it is now important that the information should be available in simple and local language format, in accessible format like braille, audible tapes for persons with visual impairments, etc. So now it's an Indian industries along with startups, MNC, research lab to play a key role to providing the technologies like AI, NLP, and making an affordable solution in the marketplace. Next slide, yeah. Why the need of standards is required? Because as we have seen it, we are in the digital infrastructure. We use digital infrastructure platform in our daily life, but some section of our society have been left behind in this digital journey. This increases the digital divide. So there is a need of policy, standard guidelines for accessibility standards for ICT products. The standards will aim towards one policy for all, which provides a universal benefits while improving usability and ensuring interoperability. This will also enable uniformity in public procurement, like the target audience, like public procurement policymakers will make use of these standards for their products. Also, the reference standards will also help the vendors and buyers to have a common platform or understanding of what is to be considered to be accessible. It will also be beneficial for the product designers, developers, and testers. Next slide, please. these are some of the accessibility policies and guidelines in India, which Dinesh sir has already mentioned. I would like to add one more thing, like TRI consultation papers TRI has come out with the consultation papers on making accessible for person with disability. There's GIGWW, which is the earlier new version is there in February 2018. We have accessibility standards for person with disability in TV programs. Along with this, there's an ongoing work on Indian accessibility standards for ICT, a mighty initiative. CDAC, STQC, and BIS are working together on preparation of Indian accessibility standards. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So using this ecosystem, CDAC has studied prominent international standards like the WCAG EN section 508, along with the national standards of BIS and GIWD, and he have form of drafting committee, and with several discussion with an experts have come out with a study report. The committee has recommended that EN standards would form a basis for Indian standards, which should be fully harmonized with US 508 and WCAG 2.1. Specifically, we have to customize it for the Indian context, that is pertaining to such as language literacy use cases and industry readiness, which needs to be further firmed up. Further, CDAC has also conducted two workshops for that, and would also need to have meetings with the stakeholders, including government agencies, procurement department, testing evaluation committees, usually decision makers, software for the same. So CAI is an initiative to change the ICT-based products landscape to support accessibility. Thank you. I would like to have a sincere thank to MITI and BI for inviting and giving CDAC an opportunity to deliver on such global event on digital access and inclusion for people with disability. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Subramaniam and Ms. Linali for sharing with us challenges during pandemic, challenges faced by children and teachers. And he's also a co-chair of BIF Committee on ICT for Inclusive Availability, and she works with Microsoft. Management and business law graduate with over 16 years of experience across different verticals. She's deeply passionate about purposeful digital inclusion and is an evangelist of the accessible technologies to empower everyone. She advocates the use of inclusive design principle and has been a speaker at various government, academia, civil society, and industry seminars on use and benefits of inclusive technologies. I request Karishma to please join us and share her perspective. You have a presentation, if I understand, Karishma?
Yes, thank you so much, Dinesh. But before I get to my presentation, may I request the organizer, Seema or Ms. Neema, there is a small video that I want to start with, and then I'll get into the presentation. Can we play the video, please? Can we put it on full screen and share the audio as well? Thank you.
Technology can make things easier, but it can also make things possible. More than 1 billion people have a disability around the world. And while today, many report experiencing mental health conditions for the first time. The truth is, most of us will experience disability at some point in our lives, temporarily or permanently. Still, people with disabilities face higher unemployment rates, more than twice that without, and only 1 in 10 have access to the assistive devices they need to be active in their communities. The COVID-19 pandemic has only exacerbated this disability divide, with many experiencing symptoms that are lasting for weeks or months after diagnosis. Here at Microsoft, we've been on a journey to design technology with and by people with disabilities. We're learning every day. People with disabilities are leading the way. Office features now make it easier for millions to create and send accessible, inclusive communications. More opportunities for improving digital skills and learning are available than ever before. And people with disabilities are preparing for an increasingly digital job market. As the world changes, our approach to accessibility is changing too. That's why we're upping our ambition over the next 5 years. Not only do we want to scale accessible and affordable technology, we're investing in skilling opportunities in talent development and doubling down on our promise to build and model inclusive workplaces. But we can't close the disability divide alone. As communities around the world prepare for post-pandemic life, we want others to join this global cause to make society more inclusive. Disability is a strength, and society is stronger when it's accessible to everyone. And while technology can make things possible, people make things amazing. To learn more, visit aka.ms/accessibility-commitment.
Thank you for playing that video. If you can please bring up the presentation while I'll get started. So we believe there are no limits to what people can achieve when technology reflects the diversity of everyone who uses it. Building accessibility into everything we do helps us to empower people with disabilities, people with all abilities to achieve more and what they love to do. Accessibility is fundamental to our mission of empowering every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And that's why we continue to evolve and innovate in this space. And you just heard in that video, we have upped our ambition, and there's a 5-year strategy that we have coming up with where we are trying to bridge the disability divide. While we've been on this journey for long, we constantly strive to innovate so that we can build more partnerships, we can work together and accelerate this journey of creating an inclusive society, inclusive ecosystem. Could you put that on presentation mode, please? And right.
Slide show, Seema?
Not yet.
It's not yet come up. Anyways, I'll keep going while you do that. We all understand that pandemic has taught us and how the overall experience of people is. And in these extraordinary times, the safety and well-being, all those around us, is paramount. Efforts to emphasize mental and emotional well-being are timelier than ever. And if we look at, and it was mentioned earlier as well, mental health is a #1 cause of disability in the world today, according to WHO. In India alone, it was recently reported that we have less than one expert for 1 lakh people, whereas the minimum requirement is of having 3 experts per 1 lakh people who can actually help people with mental health issues and stress. But we definitely know that technology can always come to rescue and bridge that gap to support people around the world. As technology gets further embedded into our day-to-day lives, we have the opportunity to include people with disabilities. And countries like India, we know the digital divide is real, and it can create limitations for persons with disabilities. Therefore, enabling accessible and affordable technology is one of our key priorities at Microsoft. Whether it is through partnerships or fostering local innovation, we strive to build that bridge that will bridge that digital divide. When we talk about local innovation, Standards has, as we've heard, is playing great role globally, and accessibility IT standards will be paramount for that local innovation to flourish. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like it was mentioned by Dinesh, there are international harmonized standards, just like EN 301-549 specifically, which can easily be adopted by India like it has been by many other countries. So we just have to work towards implementing that and bringing that to India. When we talk about accessibility, what the accessibility journey might look like, the question that people ask is, what is accessibility? And it can mean many different things to different people. While for some people, it's about accessible buildings, structures. In fact, for most people, as we talk to them, they talk about the structure and the building issues, like railings around the stairways, or we talk about ramps, or we talk about the tactile buttons in the elevators, or even following the accessibility compliance standards. But people may or may not realize that accessible digital tools are being developed and made available to people around the world. And by digital accessibility, we mean ensuring that people are connected to each other through information technology, and they have a user interface that is customizable and adaptive to their own needs. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. Barriers are in the environment and tools that cause disability. It is the mismatched human interactions that we define disability as. But accessibility is a solvable design challenge. If you look at inclusive design, and we heard in the morning session, Dr. Kumar from MATI also talked about that. Accessibility built into the product design and not bolted on can definitely drive greater innovation. Technologies like artificial intelligence, data analytics, and virtual reality are actually enabling us to build better products. And it is helping us experience the world in an inclusive way. For example, if I look at the Seeing AI application, it was a mobile app developed by Microsoft in 2017, which is actually for blind and people with low vision. And it is narrating them the world around them, whether it is to access the menu in a restaurant or to read a currency note. This app is really enabling greater experiences for them. And that's what accessibility means to us. How can we enable greater experiences for everyone? We all come with certain kinds of unconscious biases. Sometimes it is cultural, sometimes it is social, or even inherited. But being thoughtful, responsible, and conscious in our design thinking and the decision making, we can overcome these biases. So we always should keep in mind that when we include intentionally, we do not exclude unintentionally. And the final point in the slide that I want to make is accessibility for few is usability for many. The culture of empathy drives innovation. While addressing the need to solve for a particular issue or a community, we actually benefit a much larger audience. And that's what helps us, that fosters innovation. For example, if you look at bendy straws, widely used by restaurants everywhere, but now is a viable business after they were ordered by hospitals for the patients with limited mobility. The television video captioning, when it began for people who were deaf or hard of hearing, and now is widely used in a lot of places. In fact, Microsoft began transcribing event keynotes to help our attendees who were deaf or hard of hearing. But we ended up getting a whole lot of feedback from our audiences for whom English was a second language. So live transcription helped them navigate now through the technical decisions of the fast-paced product demos in multiple different languages. So that's where when the design and intentionality is amalgamated, innovation happens. And I just want to mention this quote by our CEO, Satya Nadella. It says, technology is the only malleable things humans have created, and we can create economic prosperity. Can we move on, please? So at Microsoft, our journey on accessibility started in early 90s. We are not perfect. We still have a long way to go because we are learning along the way. right from our announcement of the commitment to getting product features out to getting a ERG, which is an employee resource group within the organization that is deeply focused, passionate people coming together to work towards the community of employees who are disabled and helping communities at large. We had our first Ability Summit, a Global Ability Summit in 2011, where we have 80 attendees in the room. And earlier this month, we had our 15th Ability Summit. And I'm so pleased to let you know that there were 12,000 plus attendees in this virtual world from around the world. 111 countries participated in that event. This really shows that as a world, we are really moving towards making this commitment to accessibility real. Along the way, we've had some good lessons for us. And one of the most important yes, move on, please, the next slide, was that accessibility needs to be built in. It is not to be bolted on. So it's part of our company's culture and runs throughout everything we do in the company. And it started with Satya Nadella coming on board in 2014. And our mission statement, our bold mission statement of empowering every person in every organization on the planet to achieve more, accessibility became a fundamental to that mission. Next slide, please. So for us, accessibility is a responsibility and an opportunity. And when we say responsibility, there are 1 billion plus people around the world who need assistive technology, and only 1 in 10 have access to those products. We've seen the video, we've heard many people talk about this before, that disability can affect any of us at any point in time in life. It's not just about permanent disability. There are temporary, somebody injured their arm, or a new parent who's holding a child. We all need similar kind of assistive technologies to make our experiences better. Look at the aging population, and we mentioned about the mental health issues and others. While we have that responsibility, there are several studies to suggest that accessibility is a huge opportunity. There is a great talent pool out there that is untapped, and the organizations today have that opportunity to bring the talent on board. And now, especially in these times, in the current times, COVID, when we are all working online, there is no restriction to be at work. So even people in the remotest of areas with the bandwidth, with the broadband connection can just stay on and get a job. So that's what the opportunity lies, and also the business opportunity for organizations. The studies have suggested that the organizations who are inclusive, they have higher revenue growth, their net income is higher, and they perform better on economic profit margin. Can we move on, please? Very quickly at Microsoft, we take a 4-pronged approach, right from our culture to systems, to products, and how we are innovating for future by learning across this journey from people we meet, from our partnerships, from all that we learn through our products and people with disabilities who are part of our organization. In this process, one of the most important things that we have done is we have actually started to manage accessibility like a business. So it's an evolution model that we have put in place after learning from maturity models like Ken and Mellon capability, level access, digital accessibility maturity model. A maturity model essentially is something that defines how developed an organization is in addressing a business problem like accessibility. And it includes a set of structured levels that describe how well the behaviors or the practices and processes in an organization can be reliable and sustainable and produce those kind of outcomes. And perhaps the model that any organization can adopt to accelerate their own journey on accessibility. We have this model available to share with our customers, partners, industry, whoever would want to be on this journey and start their own accessibility journey in their workplace. And our responsibility does not just... Sorry, is there a question?
Sorry. No, go ahead.
Okay. So our responsibility to inclusive technology does not just stop at creating those products and services and just shipping them out of the door. It extends beyond that. It is, so we have a disability answer desk both for enterprises and consumers. It's available in 16 markets and in various different languages, where people are calling and getting support on the technology that they're using from Microsoft, so that one, they can get assistance, and two, we can get feedback from the users directly, which is very important for our growth. Our continuous learning only happens when we get this constant feedback from the users. Can we move on, please? To create the knowledge, share that knowledge with people, create that excitement and the pride in building those accessible experiences. Within Microsoft, we have created the Accessibility in Action badge. It's a digital badge which any Microsoft employee through our learning portal goes and takes, and it's something which they can really put up on their social networks to say that they are accessibility, they have familiarized themselves with accessibility, they understand what a culture of accessibility or inclusion means, how they can implement best practices. And similar badge is now made available to all organizations and consumers outside Microsoft in form of Accessibility Fundamental. There's a whole training series that people can go and take. It's freely available. There's courses for the educator community, because now we all know in these times, education is just remote. And educators constantly need to upskill themselves to be able to cater to the needs of students with disabilities. So there we have courses for them, which are again freely available, where they can upskill themselves. So it's about, while we learn on this journey, we want to continue to share those practices with the broader community so that everybody can be together. So with that, I want to invite you to become an innovator in accessibility. Join this journey if you still haven't. Take some learning courses and come join us and be a part of this whole ecosystem. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Karishma. Thank you very much for sharing all update around accessibility, and especially the various initiatives which Microsoft has taken up by their strategy, action plans to bridge the digital divide, what advice around accessibility, and most importantly, I'm sure everybody liked it. Accessibility has to be by design. It has to be built in, not bolt in at the later stage of your products and solutions. Very, very important and very critical. And I also concur that accessibility, while it is a responsibility, it is also an opportunity from a business perspective. And none other than, I mean, this statement is very true that today or tomorrow, we all, at any stage of our life, will come across some kind of disability or accessibility related need. So thank you very much. Greatly appreciated. Before I move to my next panelist, I'm taking this opportunity to welcome our chief guest of the session, Shri B.K. Jogji. Sir, very, very good evening. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. Mr. B.K. Jog is a member services and DG Telecom, Department of Telecommunications and Ministry of Communications, sir. So we will look forward for your intervention at the end of this panel session. I'm also taking this opportunity to thank Mr. Dipendra Minocha ji, Director Developing Countries Program, the DAISY, who has come out of the COVID, but he has taken out time to join us. Thank you very much, Jog sir. Baba Shukriya.
Thank you. Sorry, I am late, but anyway, I will join and contribute something.
Thank you
very much
for
joining us, Mr. Job. Thank you.
Thank you, Mukherjee ji.
Thank you, sir. With that, let me move to my next panelist, who is Mr. Andrew Kirkpatrick, who is the head of accessibility at Adobe. Andrew and his team define Adobe's overall strategy for accessibility and work with customers and standards group, including representing Adobe on the accessibility focused committee at the FCC, the United States Access Board, ITSE, and the World Wide Web Consortium. Andrew has served as co-chair of the W3C's Accessibility Guidelines Working Group and is an editor for the Web Content Accessibility Guideline 2.1 standards. So with that, thank you very much, Mr. Andrew. Floor is yours. Thank you. You are on mute, Andrew, and please. No, we cannot hear you. No, we are still not able to hear you. Maybe you can log in now, log out and log in back because we are not able to hear you. And we are very thankful to Mr. Andrew. He's joining us from US. Woke up quite early. No, not able to hear you. Still, sir. Maybe I would request you if you could log out and log back in. Probably that could fix the issues. Okay, so let's wait for him. But let's make use of the time. Maybe before Mr. Andrew joins back us, I will introduce our other two panelists.
So he's back, sir.
Okay, thank you, Nima. I don't see him. Mr. Andrew, you're back. We're not able to hear you as of now. I see some noises, so maybe you're coming back.
Could you check your system sound? Sometimes on the keyboard, the sound is off.
He was okay. His everything was working when he logged in. Not yet. Something came. Oh. Okay. Anyhow, I'll stop when we could hear his voice. So let's make use of the time. We have two more panelists. I will briefly introduce them. We have Mr. Dinesh Kaushal, who is a manager technology publicist Sapient. He's a thought leader and a pioneer for development of technologies for the visually challenged, working since 2003. He has developed the world's first open source screen reader. Thank you very much, sir. Along with Dr. Nimita, we heard Dr. Nimita this morning, he has led the Mobile Accessibility Practices Group for the development of accessible mobile apps, which are now part of government guidelines for mobile accessibility. He has also presented at national and international forums like GIDS 2017 and CSUN 2016. So thank you very much, sir, joining. We look forward for your intervention very soon. With that, let me also introduce Dr. Dipendra Manocha, who is a director, developing countries program and lead of training and tech support, the DAISY Consortium. As a director of the DAISY Consortium that works towards providing publications in accessible format to the print disabled, he is also a founder, trustee of Saksham Trust, president of the DAISY Forum of India, and VP of National Associations for the Blind, Delhi State. An Ashoka Fellow, he is the recipient of National Award, IBN Super Idol Award, and IIM Lucknow Leadership Award. So we have the pleasure of welcoming you, Mr. Dipendra Manocha. Nima, do we have is Andrew back? I see he's online.
He is online, but we still can't hear him.
Okay, so let's give him some more time. Let me request now Mr. Dinesh Kaushal to have his intervention and share his perspective. Please, Mr. Kaushal, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dinesh Chand Sharma ji, because I met you a few applications, and if you look at the Government of India list of websites, it's almost impossible, insanely difficult to make all of them accessible. So the problem is, where should we start? Now, ideally, we should start from the applications which are most critical. Unfortunately, that's something that is sometimes not happening. So a lot of the things we can get from our data and from our analytics, which applications are most prominent, but we are not able to prioritize them. So our understanding is that it makes sense to make the most critical applications accessible first and keep working on making others accessible. Not that only we make only the most important applications accessible, but we should find out first which are the most critical ones. And like for an employee system, usually your attendance programs or your employee related financial related information needs more importance than other good to have information. And the fourth thing is engaging the end users. Sometimes we have seen that there are not that many end users involved in the implementation. Even though we have standards have specified a lot of things, but still there are some things maybe in the understanding of the way standards are implemented, or maybe some things are still not captured by the standards. So end user involvement is equally important. And last but not the least is, which we have seen here also, that we need to have an established channel wherever an organization is working. And I was happy to hear from Dr. Seth that they have started a channel where we can report accessibility issues. And similarly, Microsoft and Facebook have also come up with the channels that can let the end users report the challenges that they face. So those things, because until you have completed the entire ecosystem to an accessible one, we need to have a mechanism where an individual can report a specific challenge that we have. So I would like to make it kind of memorable. I tried to make an acronym, CAPEX, which is like an acronym that a lot of people in finance use at CAPEX, which stands for capital expenditure. So CAPEX is commitment, awareness, prioritize, engaging users, and make a channel so that users can report their challenges. And of course, we can keep working on the standard development. Yeah, so I think those are the things that I would like to stress on. So I'm done with my discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kaushal. It's always a pleasure to work with you, to interact with you. Why not? The passion will come up when the subject itself is so important, and it's so important and critical. We have to continue with our passion, and I'm seriously thankful, sincerely thankful for your sharing your thoughts, especially highlighting the importance of commitment and prioritization. I completely concur and agree that in our country, the awareness around standardization is missing quite a big way. And especially the end user who will become the implementer or user of that particular solution or a product at the end of it shall also need to be made aware about these standardization. And that is, I think, we are working together at CDAC, at Bureau of Indian Standard. Even I have taken up this discussion with Bureau of Indian Standard that they should make use of their various training centers and make education about standardization an important element in the country. Because until we are not aware of, we will not be able to use it or implement it. So thank you very much, sir. It's always a pleasure to hear you, to work with you. Thank you very much, sir. With that, I would move to our next panelist. Unfortunately, Mr. Andrew, still trying. Can
you hear me now?
Yes. He's back. Thank you very much, sir. We can't miss you for sure. Seriously thankful. So I would hand over the mic to you without losing any more time, sir. Mr. Andrew.
Yes. Yeah, I apologize for the and to technology for now allowing me to speak to you. In speaking about the role of standards in providing access, particularly in a COVID world, really one of the keys to remaining connected is also the same as the key to functioning well in a remote capacity. For many of our customers and companies around the world, COVID has massively accelerated the path to digital transformation of both business practices and customer engagement. And this is something that I think many companies were on this path anyways. It was widely recognized as this is the way that we're doing things moving forward. But I think that, in many cases, they were not prepared for it to happen, in March of 2020. And that is the reality of what's happened. And so it's really forced a lot of companies to rethink how they're doing their work, from a consumer basis, from a student educator basis, from everything that we do in life, whether we're shopping online, accessing medical staff for, doctor visits or just records, our entertainment, communication with friends and family and colleagues. This is all essential and in many cases the only way. And COVID has, through this, eliminated the fallback option that many companies and organizations have leaned on for years to support people with disabilities, which is that there's someone who can provide assistance in person if you just come into the store, or there's someone who can help you when you're in the classroom directly. And so it's been very challenging, but also in many ways very illuminating for organizations to see that we really need a all-encompassing, fully accessible solution in order to make sure that we're addressing the needs of everyone. And that, of course, includes people with disabilities. So many organizations now and for the past year really have been redoubling their efforts to address accessibility in these online resources. And this is where I believe the standards really come in. We have, as was just indicated, there's knowledge gaps out there. Not everyone understands how to address accessibility in whether it's a website, a mobile app, a desktop application. And we have people who, like many of the people on this call, have dedicated their careers to understanding accessibility and knowing how to implement accessibility properly. But the reality is that most people who are running websites, even large ones in many cases, don't, or they're not very familiar. They're on that learning path. And so we certainly applaud efforts around the world, whether that's through organizations like the IAAP or through efforts by companies like Microsoft to educate people around accessibility. But the work that we've been doing a lot of in standards is around the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and then also standards for PDF accessibility with PDF UA. But the value of WCAG, and I should also highlight, we've mentioned EN 301549, and WCAG is the basis of the technical standards for the European EN 301549. And WCAG is also the basis for the Section 508 standard in the US, and it provides standard testable criteria for developers to use to make their content more accessible. And as was just said, it is complex, and it is not complex for each individual item is not complex. It's more complex in aggregate. But if you try and imagine the challenges at a global scale, or even smaller than a global scale, even just within India, of making making websites accessible without that sort of standardized guidance, without that standard testable criteria, it would really be a tremendous challenge. And when I talk to people around the world who are doing work, developers. There's lots of great different ideas that come up, but those ideas certainly represent different ways of addressing accessibility, and it is critical that the overall accessibility ecosystem functions well together. So I mentioned the PDF UA standard, and the PDF UA standard is what Adobe has, we launched several years ago, and it's now part of the PDF Association, which is to also provide a standard testable criteria for PDF documents, but also defines what the role of the user agents, whether that's Adobe Reader or another PDF reader, so that it can be possible for a PDF document developer to create something and have the confidence that the assistive technologies and the PDF viewers are going to all play as part of the same system. And the same is the case with regards to WCAG. I was one of the editors of WCAG 2.1, and so we worked for many years to provide an update for 2.0. Also on my team, we have I have James Nerthen, who's one of the editors for the ARIA standard. And ARIA very much is a standard for accessible rich internet applications, and it plays with the HTML standard. And the browsers and assistive technologies are looking at and using ARIA and HTML and expecting certain types of information that web authors need to provide within the framework of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And it's the interplay of these different pieces that really helps provide the scale that we can get from accessibility, because everyone's looking at the same standards and able to depend on behaviors. The end users can depend on behaviors from tools like NVDA, like tools like JAWS, and browsers like Chrome or Firefox or Safari. And so without these standards, I think we would really be in a very difficult situation, even though it also feels like a difficult situation trying to educate the world about what those standards are and to get everyone using them. The standards, in particular WCAG and PDF UA, don't guarantee accessibility, but they are providing a framework for success and guidance to work within that framework. These standards also don't guarantee usability for users with disabilities. And the previous speaker also spoke about efforts around inclusive design, and we strongly recommend that organizations engage with users at the design stage and at the implementation stage to help improve the experience for all users. If you have a WCAG conforming website, you've done a lot of very important things to make sure your content is going to be accessible, but this is not getting you to 100% accessibility. It's, maybe it gets you to 80 or 85 or 90% accessibility, but working with end users to make sure you're addressing what they need and that the content is organized in a way that is optimally usable is critically important to do. One of the things that Adobe is doing now and is just announcing is that we're releasing a practicable guide to inclusive research, which is going to be available and linked from a blog post that we will be posting in about an hour. And it's work that was done with Adobe researchers and other organizations like Workday to help provide some information to help people engage with end users for doing inclusive research to validate either designs or implementations. But this work is very critical. And this part really is the more interesting part. I mean, following the standards is challenging, interesting work in many cases, but if you've been told that your website passes an accessibility validation tool, or your website meets all the manual accessibility checks, that's great and satisfying, but what really is exciting is making sure that your information and your tools work well for end users and solve real world problems that people are trying to deal with. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we're doing at Adobe around this. So at Adobe, we've got products that are very widely used. People are very familiar with tools like Adobe Acrobat or Adobe Photoshop, but often less familiar with many of our enterprise tools. We've got a number of different tools like the Adobe Experience Manager that many people have not heard of and probably realistically don't need to hear about. But if you are operating a large commercial website, you almost certainly have heard of and probably are using these tools. So my team works with our product teams to help those teams understand the requirements and implement support and applications, both for the user interface, but also to help our customers deliver accessible experiences. And this is really where Adobe is probably has its biggest impact, which is that large organizations, most large organizations are using Adobe products in one way or another. So my organization is helping our product teams ensure that our customers can be successful. One other large focus for my engineers is working on our internal component library, which is called React Spectrum, and that helps our product teams be successful. But it's also something that we've done.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Could you repeat the name? I didn't get that. I'm sorry.
React Spectrum.
Okay, go ahead, Andrew.
And one of the things that's a part of this effort is we've also created an open source library which helps other organizations create accessible design systems, and it's an open source library of React hooks to help developers more easily implement accessibility. And this is called React Aria, and this is freely available on Adobe's website for other organizations to utilize. One of the big challenges that we talked about is implementing accessibility, implementing what is recommended in ARIA in order to support what's required by WCAG. And React ARIA is designed to help make that easier for developers who are building these design systems. In addition to that, my team's continually monitoring progress against our internal standards, which mirror external standards, and we continue to push for continuous improvement with our products. One specific improvement that I'm excited to talk about that I hope people have heard about is for Acrobat and Adobe Reader on mobile, which is called Liquid Mode. And one of the challenges that people have had with PDF documents, particularly on small screens, whether it's an iPad or an iPhone or an Android device, is when you want to increase the size of that content or you want to adapt it in some way, and you wind up with, you zoom in and there's a small portion that's visible and you have to scroll left and right and up and down in order to see it. Liquid Mode is available on our mobile device versions for Acrobat, and there's a little ink drop icon that's at the top, and if you click on that, it's actually doing some amazing things under the hood. It is sending that document out for interpretation by artificial intelligence, and it is creating essentially an HTML version in the background, and then Adobe Reader allows you to apply a variety of different view settings, including increasing the text size, changing other text characteristics, text spacing, character spacing, and we're working to grow that collection of changes that are available. But the end result is that one of the groups of people that really had problems with PDF documents, particularly on devices, were low vision users. We've done a tremendous amount of work over the years to make it work well for users who are blind or visually impaired, but those users who are visually impaired but still have some sight that they want to use, PDF documents have had more substantial challenges there, and liquid mode is really helping address some of that. One of the other features with liquid mode that helps users with cognitive disabilities also is that it also automatically creates an outline based on the structure of that document and allows you to collapse the document so that you can view it in an outline form and expand different portions. So there's a lot of work going on in the AI machine learning space to try and improve how our PDF documents can be viewed and how they can be made more accessible to a variety of users. So looking ahead to standards, and then I'll wrap up. I am part of the WCAG working group, as some of the others who I've seen on the call, I believe, are. WCAG 2.2 should be out this fall with about 9 new success criteria. WCAG 3
could you please clarify WCAG, the spelling? I'm sorry, I'm unable to grasp that.
Sure. That's WCAG. And WCAG 3.0 is a few years out, but there's work going on in that now. And it is critically important. I mean, earlier, there was discussion about adapting standards to local versions, to local contexts. And that is, undeniably important, but we also really need to make sure that we have standards that are harmonized for our interconnected world. And so I would strongly encourage people to get engaged with the WCAG standards process, whether that is just reviewing working drafts, but to make sure that it works for all different contexts, whether that's in India or Japan or North America. And this work, reviewing those drafts, will help make sure it works broadly and can be applied at a global scale. So I will stop there. I know that we've lost some time with my audio issues, but I can stop, and if there's questions, we can handle those at the end.
Sincere thanks to you, Mr. Andrew. We understand when one side the technology didn't work, the other side of the technology has helped us to bring you on board, because of which we were able to hear your perspective around standardization, the importance of a standard, the importance of awareness, which was strengthening the statement made by our previous panelist that it has to be reached to the end user. And while implementing standard is a complex word, but we got to start, we got to implement, even if we achieve 80 to 90%. That's an important intervention. Thank you very much for sharing Adobe's various initiatives. We would appreciate once the practical guide is released, probably you could share it with us, and then we can share it with our audience or any other information which you would like us to share with our audience through this particular workshop or conference. I completely agree, and this is what I work in India, that while we do have some local requirement or adaptability requirement, when we transpose or implement any global standard, various standards like EN 301549 was one example, which does include WCAG 2.1. Harmonization is key, because at the end of it, when we build a product or a solution based on a standard, if that standard is not harmonized while addressing the interoperability and interconnectivity, we will lose the economies of scale. And we always appreciate with our stakeholders in India and around the world that bring up those requirements by participating in these working groups and the technical committees, because this local requirement might be applicable for all around the world, for many regions of the world. So highlight those requirements, get the next version of that standard instead of modifying this standard for the local needs without participation. So thank you very much for your intervention. We would look forward for your additional information if you think we should share it. At the end of it, we have one more speaker or a panelist left. At the end of it, we will have Q&A session for some time. I know session is running a little late, but it's a very important discussions and the presentations we are doing it. So with that, thank you very much, Mr. Andrew. I will move to my last panelist, Mr. Deependra Manocha, and I hope he's able to join us, and he has joined us. He was here for a long time now. If he's still there, I have introduced you, sir. May I request your kind intervention and share your thoughts around this session, sir? To Mr. Deependra Manocha.
Thank you, Dineshji. I'm very much here. So today, as I was giving a second thought, I think I'm just here making a presentation in a very different hat. I think I'll be more speaking as a COVID survivor, highlighting the needs for the implementation of the standards and what it really meant and what worked and what failed in terms of the implementation of these standards and the impact it had in this fight against COVID. So, but before that, I'd like to bring on table for sure my appreciation and gratitude, or even more better, more profound words, to companies like Microsoft, Apple, Google, who have actually, given enough emphasis on accessibility and make so that things like Microsoft Teams, Office, Google Meet, for example, right now, what we are using, these are all mainstream products and are usable by me as a person with blindness, which in a way ensures that I have food on my table. It's as profound and as deep as that. On the other hand, there were several examples where in India, when it came that Zoom is not to be used by any government organization, or alternatives were being thought about. There were several meetings which I attended on alternative meeting platforms where I simply could not mute or unmute myself, or could not even switch on or switch off my videos. What to say of selecting my presentations or those kind of things. So if that was the environment, and if Microsoft and Apple and Google were not having accessibility, I can assure you, I would not be a working person. So thanks to the companies who have adhered to accessibility and adhered to and given enough emphasis on following accessibility standards for keeping us employable. The second aspect which I would want to say also is that we are talking about standards, but there is also another very big piece on standards, which is accessibility validators and checkers that play as important a role as standard itself. And I think those just needs to be mentioned and brought those parts on table. For example, as DAISY Consortium, we participated a great deal in coming up with EPUB standard. But then what really made it implementable was this development of this tool called Accessibility Checker for EPUB, ACE, which now is one of the most widely used tools developed by DAISY Consortium by publishers, and they have incorporated ACE in their production workflows by many, many mainstream publishers to ensure that the publications that are coming out of their publication houses are born accessible. And that makes a huge difference. So while we are deciding on standards, simultaneously, the validators and checkers of accessibility, although they do not take away the manual intervention and tweaking, but they still do a huge job actually of ensuring accessibility. Coming to some of the COVID experiences, the first thing that happened as soon as the first symptoms appeared of COVID was isolation. I did not want any of my other family members, especially the senior citizens at home, to be infected by the same virus. And isolation meant that the first challenge was medication. Medication was to be administered. How to identify right medicines to be taken. A very common standard and practice is that in many countries there is braille labeling has become as defined as a standard which must happen on medication. Unfortunately, in India that doesn't exist. The second key gap which was identified was that one of the methods of making products labeling and product things accessible is the standard database nationally created for the barcode related informations. There are standard barcodes on products, on medicines, and there is a description of those barcodes which is on national portals or national repositories. And accessible barcode readers can, I could use an accessible barcode reader to just scan a barcode and it fetches the right information from a reliable database and is able to give me product information. Unfortunately, that again remains as a gap area in India. The Microsoft was, the presentation just mentioned about Seeing AI, accessible barcode reader is also part of that same tool. But unfortunately, in India, that doesn't work because we do not have any reliable database of barcode descriptions of standard products. So I had to rely on our section-related products like Sonic Labeler, etc., to label things myself and trying to manage things ourselves on it. But it's not a scalable operation. It's an alternative method of accessibility. Second thing came about checking temperatures or oxygen levels. Again, we have an electronic policy in India, but unfortunately there were no standards to back up the implementation of that policy as yet, which meant that none of the manufacturers in India of any digital thermometer or oximeter actually has an accessible version of it. There's no talking digital thermometer from any manufacturer in India. There's no talking oximeter available from any manufacturer from India. From Saksham, we managed to source these products, talking thermometer and talking oximeters, from a company in China, but the supply chains broke in the second wave and all the restrictions that were put in place between whatever was going on between India and China and all those repercussions. End of the day, I was lucky enough to have it as a managing trustee because, I procured one for myself whenever it was available. But during this time of second wave, so many people who wanted to acquire these products, they were out of stock because there was no reliable sort of supply chain for it. In spite of all our efforts, we could not make it available at that time. But the standards do mention, the policy does mention standards are yet not fully defined for electronic devices interfaces in India, which needs to be plugged in straight away. Similarly, there are other things. I would just also highlight that yes, there are still no products in India for talking glucometers because since I was put on steroids, there was a need to check sugar levels on thrice a day, so that because that's a side effect of those. But again, there's no accessible thing, and finally I had to break that thing and to ask one of my family members, because I didn't have any talking alternative of a glucometer, and somebody had to come in with wearing various shields, this, that, and all those precautions. Luckily, that did not sort of end up in transmitting or making another person of my family infected. But one more thing that yes, we did have a talking blood pressure monitor, again sourced from outside India, and made available only on special website on sectac.in, which Saksham runs on special products. Ideally, these should be all universal design products. They should be on our website only as an alternative. One just last thing that I would want to highlight here is that my father, of course, is not a person with blindness. He has to check his blood pressure after every 3 days. He has this heart condition. He has a very good company's blood pressure monitor. But when this talking blood pressure monitor was introduced at Saksham, he took one of the pieces. In spite of being a seeing person, he prefers the talking version of the blood pressure monitor. That simply goes on to show that universal design is not something that is preferred or to be done only for persons with disabilities. It's something that everybody enjoys, everybody prefers. Thank you, Dinesh. That's it.
You're on mute, Dinesh.
Thank you. Sorry for this, but thank you very much, Mirojaji. I am on behalf of BIF we are seriously thankful for your participation when you're recovering from this COVID, and these thoughts are truly important, especially while sharing your COVID experience of isolation, oximeter, glucometer not being of universal design. And we truly appreciate the remarkable effort done by the Saksham. And I think through this platform, post this particular conference, we will try to summarize and we will try to work on these things, because it was always important, but now it is more important, with this post-pandemic situation. So thank you very much. We have made note of it, sir, and we will ensure and do talk about the universal design aspect of it. Thank you very much. With this, we close this panel. Unfortunately, we have run out of the time. So I would not be personally like to have Q&A session, but I would appreciate, we have noted down a few questions. We would try to address them and send them in response. But before that, I will see and take a permission from Rajatji if we can have the Q&A session. But before that, I would like to invite Shri B.K. Jogji to share his thoughts with us. And then with the concurrence of the panelists and the permission of the organizer, we will see if we can address few Q&A at the end of speech by Shri B.K. Jogji. Before I give the floor to Shri B.K. Jog, let me introduce him briefly. He's a DG Telecom and a member services at the Department of Telecommunications under Ministry of Communication. He's a BE in Electronics and Telecommunications, passed out in year 1982. He was selected in UPSC in the same year, which is 1982. He has worked in various fields of telecommunications, including operation and maintenance, planning and development, material management, quality assurance, among others. He has also earlier served as advisor in DOT since October 2019 until recently. He continues to do that. Sir, thank you very much. We again have a pleasure to welcome you, sir. Floor is yours for your kind intervention, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dinesh ji. And good afternoon to all the participants. We are making rapid advancement in digital technology and making everything digitally available. Browsing the internet, catching up on social media, or texting on mobile devices are the way of modern life. But accessibility related barriers preventing people with disabilities from easily using basic forms of technology, and in some cases, even discourage them from going online. 15% of world population, that is over 1 billion, are disabled, and in our country, around 2.3 crore of people are having some kind of disability. This vast mass of the population is facing difficulty to use the digital advancement due to their disabilities. There are many reasons to promote and implement accessible telecommunications and ICTs for PWD, that is people with disabilities. It is a well-known fact that in countries like ours, PWD have a tendency to show resistance to the use of ICTs because they are not accessible to them. Some of the challenges PWD face when interacting with ICT devices include the need to have accessible ICTs that is mainstreamed by the equipment such as mobile handsets, televisions, tablets, and computers, which offer a feature or features to enable PWD to use ICTs effectively. Furthermore, the switchover from analog to digital and now the convergence of broadband and broadcast allow endless opportunities to offer accessibility services on different platforms, different formats, and for the user to personalize the chosen service. Therefore, technology and in turn telecommunication has become a key sector in realized universal access in India. During disasters and national emergencies, telecom often assumes the vital role of connecting those in need with the resources and information needed to tackle said disasters. This became increasingly evident during the ongoing COVID-19 crisis and the subsequent nationwide lockdown as our economy rapidly switched to online mode and words such as work from home, social distancing, and quarantine became commonplace. As the pandemic progressed, offices across all sectors, schools, and even the health sector switched to online modes of communication via video calls, SMS, conference calls, etc. With the notable Arogya Setu app and CoWIN portal aiding the government in disseminating and monitoring COVID-19 cases and vaccination across the country, telecom has now emerged as the lifeline of the nation. But people with disability are not in a position to use this new way of life during the pandemic, as available accessibility devices for these services cannot be used by disabled one. Therefore, this pandemic is much more harassing to them. With the rapid proliferation of highly advanced domains like artificial intelligence, augmented reality, or virtual reality, new assistive technologies have also emerged. As a majority of new advancements are software-based and the hardware sector is falling short. As these assistive technologies to promote universal design and access are being developed, it is important to pace the advancements in both the software and hardware electronics sector to complement each other to make the implementation of truly universally accessible technologies a reality. Collaborative policies between all departments and research outfits have proven to be the most impactful to achieve this. With the recent attempts by DOT to introduce 5G technology in India, along with its applications in various sectors, a new era of advancements in software and hardware is expected. The new 5G network can transport huge amounts of data quickly, making it possible to use technologies over wireless networks. It puts new tools into hands of people who are creating the next wave of innovation and can lead to development of accessible and practical assistive technologies for vulnerable communities such as PWD and aged people. True digital inclusion can only be achieved when people with disabilities and older persons have unhindered access to appropriate and affordable devices, wireless connectivity, and universally designed content, along with the skills to utilize them. And telecom emerges as a powerful entity to achieve this, along with a truly digital India. Department of Telecom is committed to achieve wider broadband accessibility across the geographical spread of the country. It also recognizes the department's role as stipulated in NDCP 2018 in ensuring universal access to marginalized communities, women, and persons with disabilities via robust digital infrastructure. I hope this initiative to observe a Global Accessibility Awareness Day will help to companies and organizations to understand the difficulties of disabled in accessing in ICT and will make companies and organizations to design their products and services in such a way so that this vast population could also be included in digital transformation and could not be left behind. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Greatly appreciated, and thank you very much for highlighting the challenges faced around disability accessibility and what important role the telecom could and would play in bridging this digital divide. Infrastructure, we have it in telecom. This will become a foundation to have all the product and solutions accessible for all, universal for all. And the technologies like AI and machine learning will further strengthen this. Thank you very much, sir. We greatly appreciate your presence and sharing your perspective. Thank you very much, sir. With that, we come to the end of our session. Rajatji, I think I have few questions. Maybe if we have spent so much time.
Please, by all means.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead with the questions.
Thank you. We have some questions asked in the chat window, which I will begin with. So first question goes to Mr. Andrew. Question by Ramakrishna, sir. Can you share?
I'm not sure that Andrew is still on the system, but we can certainly see if he responds.
Okay, Mr. Andrew, are you on call still? No. Okay, Ramakrishna sir, we will collect the response to this question, and the question is actually, we would like to know if we have a video conferencing product available for enterprises user, especially from an accessibility point of view. Arun, make a note of it. We will send this question to Andrew, get the response, and share it with Ramakrishna sir.
Done. We will do that. Right.
I have one question to Subbu, Dr. Subbu. During the pandemic period, education is one key aspect, which is an important aspect. How the online learning can be made more accessible, please.
Yeah, actually, the most affected one, as many other speakers, and what has been highlighted is about this field of education and children. And even when we see the switch has been sudden, so first of the large challenge has been on the accessible content accessibility itself. And then as others highlighted about the platforms and other support. So I think these are some of the key priorities that we need to ensure, because we see, at least in India, that we need to be prepared for some more time, and these things should be taken care of on priority. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I would like to share two questions which actually came up after the first session, but as the discussion continues on a similar topic, I would open up these questions in generic sense. If anybody has any intervention to address this question, please go ahead. This question comes from Mr. Gopal Tarapalli. Should we do more than accessibility for the differently abled in a connected society? Particularly in India, this category of people are not fit for spiritual purpose. What will they get? What will they get connected to globally? This is the question. So if I repeat it, should we do more than accessibility for the differently abled in a connected society, particularly in India? Anybody would like to intervene?
Maybe you'd like to propose who would like to take that question.
Yes.
Maybe Dipendra Manocha Saab?
Yeah, Mr. Kaushalji.
And additionally Kaushal Saab, yes.
So question is Kaushal Saab, maybe I'll go to the Kaushalji.
I understood,
Yeah,
but I don't know. Well, this question was not clear because the persons with disabilities are not fit for spirituality. It was not clear. But what else can be done? Of course, apart from accessibility, I think a lot of intervention is required in education. For example, I've seen a lot of people are hesitant or maybe not aware about that there are possible ways, accessible ways of educating persons with disabilities. But education makes a lot of difference to whether a person is with or without disability. But with disability, it makes even more bigger impact. So I would say, apart from accessibility, education is very important. And when we talk about accessibility, we of course mean physical and information and other accessibilities. And I also want to add one more thing regarding online education, that what Mr. Dipendra Manocha has also highlighted, that EPUB books are available and a lot of content needs to be made accessible, which is when everybody is reading online and we are attending online like Coursera kind of courses, they all have to be accessible so that people with disabilities can participate equally.
Thank you, Kaushalji. Minocha ji, do you have anything to add on to this perspective or this question? See, man,
I have a small comment, Dinesh.
Yes, please, sir.
Yes, probably the speaker was referring to some amount of what you call empathy and kinship. See, the layers, if you see, before you make a technology and other things, first of all, sense of togetherness must be on the mind. He was referring to the mind. If you relate to them as a bonding, so many things can happen. Wonder things can happen. That's what probably philosophically he was asking the question.
Absolutely.
It is more of ethos of that. Then see, it is always said. I think many of the distinguished members are there. The people with disabilities have many very extremely powerful abilities. So once you open the tap, they will come out fantastic. So probably is what he meant.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you very much for your intervention. I have one last question, which basically says that it is always good to have policies in place. And I think this was also highlighted by Minocha ji, that it's not only adoption of standard, it's more an implementation of standard. That's why we talk about the validators and checkers, which should also be put in place once we adopt these standards. Because if product and solutions are not in compliance, not verified to be compliant, not validated to be compliant, it is of no use. So it's a similar questions they're asking. There are measures in place to make vendor accountable? We see websites not only accessible but also unusable. I'm talking about recently made website and not the legacy one. It would be good to have accessibility consultant within an IC and under each department of IT team. I think this is one question we could send it back, Rajatji, to ministry, where they're highlighting that we need to make sure by hiring a consultant to ensure when we claim that the website has been upgraded with WCAG 2.0 or 2.1, we must ensure that the implementation has taken place. So this is one of the suggestions our audience has given, and we should share it with them to ensure that validators, checkers, consultant are put in place to ensure these are really usable from an end user perspective.
Excellent suggestion,
yes.
I would also share one more example of such kind of inaccessibility. So sometimes you go to an ATM and it has braille labels and everything, but it does not have an option to allow you to speak, which tells you that probably something is done. But then when you plug in your headphone, nothing happens. So,
exactly. You don't have a confirmation back that what you did is really worked. Absolutely.
And somebody was like, people who are looking at it saying, "Oh wow, they have put braille on it." So that raises expectations, and as well as the
one side when you feel happy, and then another side you are not happy with it. I would appreciate from all the panelists, to send us, if you would like, BIF, to take up any of the key recommendations which you think like it's missing, its implementation or adoption, or any kind of relevant subject or an issue. We can definitely consolidate at BIF platform, and we would be happy to take it up with the relevant stakeholders in India. So please feel free to share those input to us. With that, I will close this session, and I would invite Dr. Baveja, Dr. B.M. Baveja, who is also our principal advisor at our Broadband India Forum, and he's also a former senior director at the Ministry of Electronics, Government of India, to have the closing remarks. But before that, let me introduce you a little more. Dr. B.M. Baveja, I had a fortunate experience to work with him for many, many years. But with his rich experience spanning over 3 decades at MITI, Dr. Baveja is responsible for more than 200 sponsored R&D and infrastructure projects in electronics, IT, communications, and broadband technologies, and many other digital India-related projects. So that's what, under his leadership, we had a sponsorship of various R&D. An ISO 9000 certified lead assessor. He's a member of IEEE, fellow IETE. He's also established various centers of excellence under his leadership, such as CEVID, ERDC, CDAC, CEDTs, ITRA, and SAME. We have a pleasure to request Dr. B.M. Baveja to kindly give us your closing remarks. Thank you, sir. Mr. Baveja there? Yeah, I see him online. Sir, please unmute.
Yeah. Oh, sure. So firstly, let me thank BIF to give me this opportunity on the session 2, which was very well moderated by Dinesh Chandra Sharma. He gave the importance of staying connected during the COVID environment and the role of various standards. He covered all the aspects of the international standards and about the standards work done by the
Mr. Baveja, just 1 second. I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Renuka ma'am, we can switch now.
Yeah, and to help our interpreter, let's speak a little slower.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, conversational.
Okay, perfect.
No problem. He was going well. Thank you. Sir, you can continue.
So he Dinesh Chand covered entire gamut of the international standards and the work done in India through the BIS. Specifically, he emphasized regarding the public procurement. I'm sure these standards must come up rapidly and the government will support them on a high priority because of the accessibility importance in the country. Coming down to the CDAC, both Subramaniam, Lenali covered the aspects regarding the policy, the standards, and the challenges faced by the PWD. And they explained about the Act and what CDAC, STQC, and MITI are doing on the accessibility standards in the Indian environment. They also informed the importance of the Indian language on mobile phones, which is a very important smartphone application. And that way we can proliferate the accessibility to the entire country. Smartphones are already on the range of 600 million out of the 1100 mobile connections. Microsoft and Facebook both are doing wonderful jobs. And we had a very interesting video covered by the Microsoft showing us the importance of the emerging technologies for creating inclusiveness for the entire PWD society. It's really laudable. And then the presentation talked about aspects regarding the overview of inclusive technology services across various sectors, from education to various online and other sectors. The next speaker, Mr. Andrews, I think the next speaker was, I just noted down, Andrews did cover the role of standards in providing, particularly in the COVID world. He stressed again on the education, the online shopping, the doctor teleconsultation to support the persons in the disability. He talked about the various PDF, UA, ARIA standards of Adobe, and also about the website compliance importance. Dinesh Kaushal talked about the mobile accessibility and the group that they created for the best practices for developers to make the applications more accessible, which our additional secretary from the ministry has pushed this kind of applications to be more accessible. The Honorable Minister has also emphasized regarding the apps to be made in all Indian languages. Then he also talked about adoption of the government guidelines. He did mention about the commitment, awareness, and the passion of the entire stakeholders for making the persons with disability more accessible. Devendra Minecha talked about the importance of accessibility, validation, and the checkers, especially in the context of the EPUB standard that they launched. He mentioned about the importance of the Braille labeling and the standard barcodes to be made more accessible, especially in the COVID pandemic when the medicines and others are important to be tracked by the PWDs. He talked about the talking thermometers, the BP, the glucometer, and the oximeter, very, very essential during the pandemic. And the government should come out with certain guidelines for the easy availability of these equipments. Mr. Joe, honorable member from the DOT, he has a vast experience in telecom, broadband, and I'm really impressed that the telecom is taking a lead, especially in light of the NDCP 2018-9-2018, to provide the universal access and to have the accessibility reach to the entire country, especially in the disaster management as well. The telecom SMSs should flow in all Indian languages and accessible in different Indian languages. To end with, I would say that this session was very fruitful with all the learned speakers. If I have missed certain speakers, it is not deliberate, but maybe I was not around. So the session does, as Dinesh Chandra said, let us get all the inputs from all the speakers and create a sort of recommendations for the government, for the public sector, for the private sector, and the entire stakeholders. With this, we can really move forward and make this the importance of being on the GAAD a very important effort made by the Broadband India Forum, thanks to Rajat and TVR to take such kind of initiatives. Thank you very much for the patient hearing.
Thank you, Bhavija sir. Thank you very much for summarizing it so well. And you have not missed out, sir, anybody. You have covered all of them very well, and we will ensure that these are consolidated. With that, I would request Dr. Nimita Narasimhan to please give us a vote of thanks. And before I invite her, so that I don't miss it, my special, sincere thanks to Saurabh and Dr. Renuka. You have done a fantastic job for the entire session. We are seriously grateful for your efforts and be part of this particular webinar. So thank you very much. We look forward to continue working with you, working with everybody on this important subject. With that, let me invite Dr. Nimita to give a vote of thanks and close these proceedings. Dr. Nimita.
Thank you, Mr. Dinesh. It has been a wonderful and very educative session for us, I believe. We have covered a whole host of issues from different angles, whether it's standards, it's good practices from companies in products and services, in barriers, in what is available in the Indian context, and how the system has failed us in COVID times. So what is clear, I feel, is that accessibility is not something we can achieve overnight. It requires long-term sustained engagement and partnership with everybody. And we at BIF are most committed to seeing this through. We welcome all your ideas and issues so that we can take that up at BIF and let's all try to make a difference together. Sincere thanks again to Dr. Renuka and Saurabh for making this meeting truly inclusive. And we apologize that you were not able to get too much of a break in between. And of course, last but not the least, all the audience, all of you who have, through your participation, made this meeting really meaningful. And we hope we continue to do this good work together. With that, let's conclude this event today, and everybody have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mehta. I will go back to Dr. Rajatji to give the final words. And let's continue working together on this important subject and fill up the gaps which we have it. Rajatji, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dinesh. Thank you so much, Dr. Nirmita Narasimhan. Thank you each and every one for making this particular session such an intensive and vibrant and contributory awareness day. I honestly think that we have got some very excellent suggestions, and Dinesh, you have done the right thing in saying that we should collate them, put them together, and send them to the ministry concerned so that they can be implemented. Dr. Baweja, you will be a stellar role in ensuring that this gets done. So thank you so much to each and every one of you who have joined us today, and we look forward to another edition of a digital dialogue along with Renuka and whoever she may bring on, whether it is with Saurabh or whoever. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening. Thanks. Thank you.